since we were reading this book, life happens, and we were just getting into what the book title is about.
Yeah, it really does feel like the meat just kind of started, and then we kept having to take breaks.
Uh huh. Yeah, now unfortunately we are in summer where everybody is, well, everybody, you and I, doing festivals.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so we will have another couple weeks of break because I have to work festivals every weekend. Actually, no, I don't have to work every Sunday. Some of the Sundays I'll be available, so maybe we can still have book club. I don't know. I'm gonna have to review the schedule. Anyway, we are just getting into the meat of it, and this chapter is awakened emotions and ordinary perfection, and kind of fun little phrase there, ordinary perfection,
Mm-hmm.
where as much as they talk about not trying to be perfect and just learning that the ordinary everyday things are already kind of perfect in their own way if we learn to appreciate them. Um, I
And
did.
also, again, the thought of not looking for something else than what is right here, right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of echoing back to other things that we have read and Buddhism in general about mindfulness and being present and finding happiness right here, right now, in whatever you're feeling. Oh,
Overall, I liked the lessons in this chapter quite a bit. Um, they resonate with stuff that I've been going through. And then one of the opening quotes, the third one was just like, ah, so spot on, so funny. Which was, I'm very brave journaling, only today I happen to have a headache. And I'm like, ah, mood, such a mood.
from Tweedledum. Credit where credit's due.
Credit where credit's due, Tweedledum. But still, like, ah, yes, my man. Yes.
Yes. Yeah, then like the first few pages, I didn't really highlight anything in particular. Um, just talking about like the connections and the sort of like innate humanness that is in feeling and the heart and being attuned with the heart.
I thought that final sentence at the bottom of the paragraph on 195 was really, yeah, that one is to neither suppress our feelings nor be caught by them, but to understand them. That is the art. Well, I don't think it doesn't summarize a ton, but what I think it does is it really leads us into the next parts of this chapter of this idea of not suppressing our emotions, because I think that
Mm-hmm.
even personally I've gone through these ideas of like I must not feel my emotions, but that's not the goal. But you can't cling to
Yeah.
them either. And so I think that sentence sets you up well to start thinking about what's about to come in the chapter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there was a part a bit later about like sort of pretending like you're unaffected
Mhm.
because we're taught, or it's some people maybe teaching that that's the way that we should be, or that we're mimicking somebody who is like that more naturally, but that
Mhm.
may not work for all of us, and that's kind of the thing too. Yeah, very, very nice, like, back and forth with different parts of this chapter, but like, everything's related, but it's not exactly the same,
Mhm.
but it's similar. Uh,
On this page like 196, particularly that last paragraph, I highlighted the whole thing but in different ways because as an overall thought it different had different like hits for me. So without the ability to be present to our feelings, we continue to blame our troubles on others, individually and collectively. And so, once again, this chapter to me is reflecting on some life circumstances I'm going through right now. And so that was like, ah, yes, I have been going through that. It's kind of been a year's journey of not blaming others for my emotions. I imagine one of the reasons people cling to their hate so stubbornly is because they sense once hate is gone, they'll be forced to deal with their own pain. And I think that that is very true just on a like emotional growth level. I thought about that. And then finally, I highlighted only when we are permeable to what is true in us will our practice go forward. And it's just kind of not running from the truth of what's in us. Because I think frequently we want to be like, I am not a person with hate in me. Well, you might be. You can't. I don't know. Anyway, I had a lot of thoughts.
Simply willing it doesn't automatically make it true.
Yes, simply willing it doesn't make it true.
But manifestation.
Yeah, if only.
For me, this brings up like I think that I don't tend toward this particular like this whole oh I'm gonna hate and be like attaching to that feeling to avoid the pain, but
Mm-hmm.
I often find it very difficult. Like there's a place in between where you have to balance between blaming everybody else or taking too much, like putting too much on yourself. Like the other people do need to be held accountable for their actions and the way that their own anger and hatred has, that they've
Mm-hmm.
lashed out at others. And in my life, often other people's inability to manage their own behaviors while as a result of those kinds of very intense emotions
Well, as
has caused
the.
that's caused me a lot of issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I try to be compassionate and understand, oh well, they're acting like that because this and this and this and this,
They
and
cannot
these are
help
the reasons
themselves.
they're like what.
They cannot help themselves is also something I tend to
Mhm.
think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
at the
they
same
do have a
time,
responsibility, but then also there's some amount of like we can also see those things or make better choices to not put ourselves in those situations sometimes. There's like a some place in between those two of oh, if I did everything differently it wouldn't have happened, and also if they had been more skillful it wouldn't have happened either.
Right, just like the author puts it in the middle of the next page of like, it's the stories we attach to these emotions
Mm-hmm.
frequently that are the problem more often than the emotion themselves existing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like you said, that story of, well, if I'd only done this, or if they'd done this, or feeling this way makes so and so a bad person, or it makes me a bad person, those stories and those narratives really affect the cycle of suffering and clinging and how you can or cannot let go of things.
Yes, very very true, and that applies for all of the emotions. I
Mhm.
found, oh yeah, it's here. Some people believe that emotions are dangerous, but the emotions themselves are rarely a problem. It is our lack of awareness of them or the stories that we believe about them that create our suffering. Yes.
Yeah.
But I
yeah,
definitely see. Oh, go
the
ahead, Ben.
stories lead back to the ego, and the ego is, after all, a collection of stories we tell ourselves. But yeah, if we just let the emotions flow through and without the stories, then it's not necessarily ego. It's just, well, the emotion comes up and then it's over.
Yeah. Very good. Difficult uh difficult trekking for all of us, I think. This next section here too, where it's kind of shifting into expectations, I guess. That we would that a lot of people are imagining that they're going to transform. Like once you learn how to do this, you're going to have this complete transformation, and that they were realizing that they didn't really have that experience. That they did transform, but it wasn't like a complete
Personality
change of
didn't
the person.
change, only the
Yeah.
way they handle the personality.
Mm-hmm. Like learning how to manage what
I
you already are instead of becoming
yeah.
something else.
Yeah,
I really love this chapter for that. It really hit this idea of like you're not just suddenly gonna magically be this like pedestal of a person that you have in your mind, right? Like, oh, if I just reach enlightenment, suddenly I'll never have my flash in the pan anger again. Oh my gosh. Oh, I found the highlight on somewhere on page like 200. To skip ahead a little, I highlighted he became a connoisseur of his neuroses.
Yeah. You just learn them really, really well.
But to skip backwards though, one of the things I highlighted that when he was talking about that woman he got involved with after coming out of monk life, it's on that same page as the quote we were talking about before. Is this wasn't just a wise spiritual detachment? So he's realizing how he hasn't just had like this wise detachment from desire, but he had lost touch with his emotions themselves. Like he had gone to the extreme of no longer knowing what he wanted, and so he had to relearn his emotions. And so I think that this is a good cautionary tale of like, hey, you can push too hard if you don't understand what you're aiming for in this practice in a way that you can kind of cripple yourself because you'll no longer be attached, like you'll no longer understand your own emotions as they arise, or you'll have
I
like
can,
suppressed them so far they don't arise, I guess.
yeah, I can very much relate to that. Not necessarily because I am detached due to spiritual practice, but because of my long-standing habit of being a people pleaser. So yeah, it's definitely something that resonates with me. Not being in touch with your wants, actually.
I don't know. So I always I just was like, that's a good lesson because I've gone through those waves of being too far from my emotions rather than mistaking a gap or a vastness away from my emotions as the same thing as not clinging to them, I guess.
Yeah, it was an interesting passage for me to read because I have known like every single person I've known who had these kinds of responses were extremely out of touch with their emotions and like were kind of stunted and didn't process things,
Yes.
or they had like a very strong aversion to conflict. This is just conflict avoidance behavior.
Mhm.
Yeah, that too.
It's like one or the other. They're either too much in the people pleasing side or they're too much in like avoid. I don't want to think about what I want because if I think about what I want, then that means I have to realize all the problems that I am not ready to do that. And they just
Well, as he puts it, we confuse, being aware of an emotion as the necessity of doing something about it, right? Like, you can be aware of an emotion and not take action.
Mhm.
But so often we get confused with that. And so one of the things I reflected on through several passages in this chapter was let's take childhood Des, who had crushes on many a people, who was like infatuated, was like, oh, they're so neat. Like, you know what I mean? And you mistake this idea of having a crush with like, I've got to do something about that. I should tell them. I don't have to tell them. I can just enjoy having a crush. Like, I don't know. Sorry. That was one of the things that came to my mind because sometimes it's one of those like embarrassment memories that comes up when your brain is like, "What if you thought about this?" for the first time in 20 years. I'm like, what if I didn't? And so that's kind of what I'm thinking about is like, is these things that come up and they can come up, but you don't have to do anything about them. I can see someone walk down the street and appreciate that they are a very attractive looking person, but do I need to go up and go, "Hey baby, what if you and I go to dinner?" You know what I mean? Like, I don't have to do anything with that emotion, but I can't. I also don't have to be like, "Well, I would never feel that way. I would never suddenly find someone who wasn't my partner attractive." No. You know what I mean? I don't have to deny that I had that emotion or that spark. It's just, you know, let it come up, don't cling to it, and let it go.
Yeah,
Sorry. I don't know if that made sense or if I was just
It
all over the
it,
place.
it made sense to me anyway.
Yeah, it made sense, but it's funny because it sounds so much like not something that the author would have put in.
I didn't write the book. That's why.
If this book was written by Des, we can just imagine
If
all the
Des,
I want-
embarrassing 12-year-old stories.
I want a desk book.
Des's book would be so hard to follow. That's the problem. Is it jump over and be like, please turn to page 42 where I give an antidote about this story to refer back to this section where I'm now talking about this. All right, now
Just
that you've
make
gone
it
to that
epic.
page and you've returned,
It's a choose your own adventure book, but
that's like I think that's how I'd have
psychology
to write it. Is it would almost be a choose your own adventure book. It's because like you're about to hear me talk about this. If you would like context, please turn back to this page. If you don't want context and would like to be confused, continue on.
To experience the flashback, go to page 27.
Experience the
To move on
flashback.
ahead, go to page 18.
Yeah, like, and I have to put just like flashbacks of like, warning. Des wanted to insert in this section an entire story about something that happened when she was 7. To avoid confusion, we've put that at the end of the book. You may turn to the end of the book now to experience the same flashback.
Footnote 53. Great. Write it.
Sorry.
A lovely tangent. Oh. Oh, actually, as long as we're still on this page, this part right here is, I think, a good point as well. That awakening to the emotions means to feel them, nothing less, nothing more. It does not require changing our feelings. Feelings change all the time on their own. In addition to the temperament comment there. But, yeah. On page 201, I had also... Wait, is it 201? 200? Maybe it was 202. Did I write down the wrong thing? I don't know what I've done. I have notes, but apparently I wasn't fully awake when I was writing the notes. Oh, it's here. This bit where it says, we secretly believe that if we truly allow ourselves to experience our feelings and desires, our self-indulgence will run rampant, or our aggression and indolence will overwhelm us. In thinking this, we confuse our true nature with the feelings of a deficient and small sense of self, for while emotions are indeed powerful forces, it is not fear and repression that will release us from their grip. Awareness is the answer. Kind of more of the same, but again, a nice way of putting it, I think. And then he talked about how they are depictions of very emotional Buddhas, and that it's learning how to kind of let them pass and redirect into something more productive instead of destructive, like transforming anger into compassion. So we can actually make some kind of have a positive effect instead of just lashing out. And then he had this little excerpt from Tuesdays with Maury, which is a book I realized I never finished reading, but it was pretty good. And the quote from Maury that's saying, "When you learn how to die, you learn how to live."
I pretty much highlighted that whole paragraph near the top of 205 that starts with, "But by throwing yourself into these emotions."
Mm.
That you have to like recognize them fully before you can detach and be like, all right, now I'm free from them.
Almost like an image of satisfying the emotion itself. Like if you kind of personify the emotion and it wants attention, and if you try not giving it attention, it's just going to keep bothering you.
It's
But
like my
if
cat who screams louder and louder for wet food until it is wet food time.
Maybe your emotions are just cats. Ever think of that?
Wow. That makes a lot of sense.
I think we figured it
Sometimes
out,
they want to
everybody.
throw things on the floor. And sometimes they have a hairball, maybe.
Sometimes they just show you their asshole.
Just emotion things.
Right.
This bit, let's see. Then it just goes into a bunch of reasons to be true to ourselves and not try to mimic others beyond the usefulness. He did say that that can sometimes be useful, but sometimes we get stuck in that, again, the expectations and thinking that this is what it should look like instead of just being what it is. And that is the, as the title said, the ordinary perfection. Just being true to yourself and recognizing the way that things are and accepting the way that things are and not trying to make them into something they aren't. And then he uses kind of this imagery of a garden, that we don't wish that pansies were taller than daffodils, or think that roses would be fine without the thorns, or wishing that children would fit into some model of perfection. That this is just the beauty of the garden and humanity. And then he had this great little thing about an Indian village that pools their money to send one of their youth to go study medicine so they can come back to be a doctor in the village. And that there was one that read, Dr. V.S. Krishna, MD failed, Calcutta Medical College. That he went to school, but he failed school. But then he still went on to provide a lot of great service for the people there because he still learned much more than anybody else had, and that he was able to make a positive difference nonetheless because of it. And at the top of this page, said perhaps all of us are like Dr. Krishna. Our human life includes both considerable successes and failures. If we allow ourselves to be caught up by feelings of either shame or pride, we will limit the scope of what we might do, who we might be. That maybe we focus a little bit too much on those kind of standards that we set instead of just, again, seeing what is there and what might actually become of it. This part too I liked. There comes a rest, a freedom when we experience the dance of life without critical thoughts of how it should look. That's been something I've been kind of personally struggling with lately.
Mhm.
It's like, oh, it should be like that. It should be like that. And some kind of feeling like I need to, I don't know, defend or explain myself to people who I guess live like more conventionally and would never make the same kinds of decisions that I have in my own life.
Mhm.
And I don't have to do that, actually. I mean, I guess part of the problem is when people are demanding it anyway, but they have to kind of get past it and be like, well, just because they're saying it doesn't mean that it's really the case, right? And if they think it's wrong and that I'm making a mistake, well, then it's my own mistake to make, and I can live with it, and they don't really have to live with it, so why do they care?
Mhm.
But that's kind of a constant struggle of like going back and forth between, yeah, it doesn't really matter, it's not their life, and then also like, but these are the people around me, and this is how they're acting, and still having some kind of effect on some days. Although then they turn around and do other things that I think are a mistake, and it's like, well, they're still doing it anyway, so. And it's like objectively much more harmful than anything that I'm doing. They're actually affecting other people. So, Oh, there was in this next section, a little phrase I thought was quite fun, and Max, I feel like you would enjoy this if you draw your attention to the sentence. He's saying that some people are strangely hermit-like, some are publicly flamboyant, some are part of the spiritual jet set, the Dharma glitterati,
Wow.
while others are Dharma nerds. But just the phrase Dharma glitterati, I'm like, what is happening?
I did not expect to see those two words next to each other.
Yeah. Like, there's a Dharma glitterati? What is this?
I'm just picturing uh, the Dalai Lama covered in glitter with like a pink party hat.
Perfect.
I want to know, like, if we search for Dharma glitterati, what it, what does Google think that means? Like, is that a thing? Like,
You could maybe enter it into an image creating AI and see what that comes up with.
oh my god. That's I guess, supplemental, interesting little thing. What does it mean? I'm also just wondering too the way that this is written here. Like, do people use this phrase? Is this something that they talk about? The Dharma
What am
glitterati?
I missing?
Yeah. And who is saying this? I don't know. But yeah, then just a bunch of, you know, pretty much all of the spiritual leaders are eccentric, and they're understanding that to come into themselves is the only way that they can actually do the practice well, and they embrace it, and we should all embrace it.
Yes.
Um, and then yeah, just the reminder again that we always get, which is that we choose to be happy. So we can choose that now, and we should do that. No matter how difficult our struggles or how many awful things that we go through, we can still choose right now to see it differently and move forward differently. Good, good.
Yay.
Yay. Actually, this poem was kind of fun too. This Ryokan poem. Today's begging is finished. At the crossroads, I wander by the side of the Buddhist shrine, talking with some children. Last year, a foolish monk. This year, no change.
This year, no change.
Great. Actually, pretty much captures like a lot of the point of this chapter, I think.
Yeah.
Just like no change. But that's okay. Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Still a lovely image, just chatting with the kids.
Yeah. Yeah, focusing on the idea that if I haven't changed it, I'm doing it wrong. Well, are you? I don't know. I'm doing it right.
I think in some ways too, the way that we frame it matters. Like you can say, "Oh, there's no change. He's still a foolish monk," but I'm sure he's foolish in like some different kinds of ways than before. And you can
Mhm.
still work through things or treat people better or treat yourself better without
Mhm.
really being, I mean, like this whole chapter, it's not like you're completely changing into a different person. And you can't reasonably expect that you will or that anyone else really will.
Yep.
And the effort, I think, is maybe better than or more important. As long as they're taking the action to go forward in a good direction. How slow you take to get there maybe doesn't really matter. And we can all embrace our silliness. But that's all I had.
Yay.
If no one else has anything,
Yay.
then we did it!
We did it.
Yay.
I'll add this. The happiness of being is being happy.
Whoa.
Did that help? Did I just blow your minds?
Yeah.
I'm enlightened now.
Like this guy. Happy, happy!
I knew we could do it.
I also actually this strikes me. This is really funny to me, not because he only knew like two English words and couldn't explain himself in English very well, but that the English words he chose to learn were just those. He's like, this is enough. I'll learn happy and empty, and that's sufficient.
You know he's right. Mostly. I do wonder what he'd say if he has to pee. Probably empty.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has a very wide application.
Yeah, it just works.